So, you've just been crowned Queen of England. Congratulations! Your country is broke, religiously schizophrenic after your siblings' reigns, and your more powerful neighbors think you're illegitimate. Basically, everyone either wants to marry you to control your country or kill you to replace you. This was the situation for Elizabeth I in 1558, a less than ideal starting position. She couldn't afford a massive army to fight off Spain or France. What she could afford, barely, was something much more useful: paranoia, and a man who was exceptionally good at weaponizing it, Sir Francis Walsingham. He was about to turn Elizabethan England into the most successful, privately funded surveillance state of the 16th century. Francis Walsingham wasn't your typical courtier. He didn't write poetry. He intercepted it. A devout, almost fanatical Puritan, he'd spent time in exile during the reign of Catholic Queen Mary. This experience left him with two core beliefs: Catholics were not to be trusted, and God's work required reading other people's mail. He was appointed Elizabeth's principal secretary, which is a deceptively boring title for chief spy, propagandist, and head of secret police. His sole purpose was to protect the Queen and the Protestant state, and his methods were creative. He had no official budget for espionage. Much of this vast network was funded directly out of his own pocket, which is a terrible financial plan, but a fantastic way to ensure employee loyalty, or at least employee dependence. Walsingham's network wasn't a building in London. It was a web of people stretched across Europe, many of whom were spectacularly untrustworthy. He employed students traveling abroad, merchants whose ships visited foreign ports, and Catholic priests he'd persuaded to work for him. These agents were called intelligencers. His most valuable assets were the double agents, men pretending to be zealous Catholic plotters while reporting everything back to him. He had agents in Paris, Rome, Madrid, and even Constantinople. At its peak, he had over 50 agents operating in foreign courts alone. They used invisible ink made from orange juice and complex substitution ciphers that were a nightmare to crack. Luckily, Walsingham had a genius on payroll for exactly that purpose. The man who turned scribbles into death warrants was Thomas Philippus. A master linguist and cryptographer, Philippus could look at a page of symbols and see treason. Walsingham set up a system to intercept diplomatic and private mail, a process that was both illegal and essential. Letters would be secretly opened, copied, and then resealed so perfectly the recipient would never know. Philippus would then get to work. It's said he could decipher most codes within a week. For particularly juicy bits of treason, he'd draw a little sketch of a gallows on the margin of the deciphered copy before sending it to Walsingham. A bit dramatic, but it certainly got the point across. This wasn't just defense, it was an information factory, turning whispers into evidence. Our first exhibit in How Not to Overthrow a Government is the Ridolfi plot of 1571. An Italian banker, Roberto Ridolfi, was the middleman for a spectacularly ambitious plan. The idea was for a Spanish army to land in England, help English Catholics rise up, assassinate Elizabeth, and put her cousin Mary, Queen of Scots, on the throne. It had everything: foreign invasion, domestic rebellion, regicide. Unfortunately for the plotters, Walsingham's agent in the Spanish embassy got wind of it. They tracked Ridolfi's messengers, one of whom was arrested with incriminating letters hidden in his boots. The Duke of Norfolk, England's top-ranking noble and Elizabeth's own cousin, was the intended English leader of the rebellion. He ended up significantly shorter after a trip to the executioner's block. A clear message was sent: nobody is untouchable. Next up, the Throckmorton plot of 1583. This one involved the Spanish ambassador Bernardino de Mendoza, who used his embassy as a command center for conspiracy. He was actively coordinating with English Catholic exiles and a young man named Francis Throckmorton to facilitate a French invasion led by the Duke of Guise. Walsingham's network had Throckmorton under surveillance for 6 months. They watched his every move, noting every visitor. When they finally raided his house, they found him trying to destroy incriminating papers. Under torture on the rack, he confessed everything, naming Mendoza as the puppet master. You can't execute an ambassador, but you can kick him out. Mendoza was expelled, proving that diplomatic immunity is really just a guideline when national security is on the line. England's relationship with Spain did not improve. Here's where things get morally murky. Walsingham didn't just discover plots, his agents sometimes encouraged them. These were agents provocateurs, spies who would join a conspiracy, egg on the other members, and help them develop their plans. Why? Because a half-formed idea is just a thought. A fully documented plot with names, dates, and plans is a prosecutable case of treason. It was a high-risk strategy. Let a plot go too far and the Queen could actually be harmed. But cut it off too early and you might not catch the ringleaders. Walsingham was a master of letting these plots mature just enough to become undeniably treasonous, then swooping in. It was a cold, calculated, and terrifyingly effective way of eliminating your enemies by giving them enough rope to hang themselves. Literally. This brings us to Walsingham's magnum opus, the Babington plot of 1586. The goal, as always, was to kill Elizabeth and crown Mary Queen of Scots. The problem had always been getting concrete proof of Mary's direct involvement, so Walsingham laid a trap. He arranged for a secret communication channel to be opened for Mary, who was imprisoned. Letters were smuggled in and out in a waterproof casing hidden inside a beer barrel bung. What Mary didn't know was that the helpful brewer was Walsingham's agent. Every single letter she sent and received was intercepted, deciphered by Phillips, and copied before being sent on its way. They let the plotters, led by the vain Anthony Babington, plan everything. When Mary finally wrote the letter explicitly approving of Elizabeth's assassination, Walsingham had her. Phillips added his little gallows doodle, and Mary's fate was sealed. The network's success wasn't just domestic. As tensions with Spain escalated into open war, Walsingham's spies became England's first line of defense. His agents in Spain sent back detailed reports on the construction of the Spanish Armada. They provided numbers of ships, lists of armaments, and schedules for sailing. One of his agents, Anthony Standen, even managed to get a tour of the Lisbon shipyards where the fleet was being assembled. This intelligence was crucial. It allowed the English Navy, led by men like Sir Francis Drake, to prepare. They knew what was coming. The information even helped Drake plan his famous 1587 raid on Cadiz, where he destroyed dozens of Spanish ships, delaying the Armada by a full year. Spying didn't win the battle, but it absolutely prevented a surprise attack that could have wiped England off the map. Let's not romanticize this. The Elizabethan state was a police state for those on the wrong side of the political and religious divide. Walsingham's methods were brutal. Torture was standard procedure for extracting information from suspected traitors. The rack, the scavenger's daughter, thumbscrews, these were the tools of his trade. Priests were hunted down and executed in horrific ways. It was a dirty business, and it took a personal toll. Walsingham poured his life and his considerable fortune into his work. He died in 1590, so deeply in debt from funding his own intelligence operations that he had to be buried at night in a simple ceremony to avoid his creditors seizing the body. The man who saved the state couldn't even afford a decent funeral. There's a certain irony in that. So what was the long-term result of all this state-sanctioned mail reading and paranoia? It was, in effect, the birth of modern, centralized intelligence. Walsingham created the blueprint for a professional secret service. He understood that information was a weapon, more powerful in some cases than an army. He demonstrated the effectiveness of counterintelligence, of turning your enemy's agents against them. He pioneered the use of code breaking as a systematic tool of statecraft. The entire operation was a precursor to MI5 and MI6, a ghost of the surveillance state that would emerge centuries later. He proved that a monarch's greatest strength isn't always their castle walls, but the whispers they can hear from 100 miles away. And it's a model that has been copied, refined, and perfected by governments ever since. Elizabeth I reigned for 44 years, navigating a treacherous political landscape to become one of England's most celebrated monarchs. It's easy to credit her charisma and political skill. But behind the throne, in the shadows, was Walsingham's network, diligently neutralizing threats before they could ever reach the palace gates. Her long reign was bought with intercepted letters, broken codes, and the lives of those deemed a threat. It proves a rather timeless lesson about power. Sometimes survival isn't about being the strongest, it's about being the one who reads the messages not meant for them. It's about knowing who your enemies are, what they're planning, and letting them walk right into a trap you set weeks in advance. It turns out that when everyone actually is out to get you, paranoia is just good sense. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more historical insights. Thanks for watching, nerds!